destroy them.
You should be running.
It's coming for us. Hellboy. Second date, no tongue.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Bill and Richard discussion. When was the last time we done this?
It was long ago.
Yeah, when we talked about Judge Dredd, and we were thinking, oh, let's make this a series. 1 year later. Hey, let's talk about Hellboy. Anyway, as you probably know, joined with me is SaberKing, or whatever the fuck he calls himself these days.
Hi guys, it's me, SaberKing from SaberComics. Yes, I'm alive. I'm just not alive on my own channel. I'm alive on other channels, including Billy's.
Don't worry, we'll get a defibrillator ready. But, so yes, we are discussing the Hellboy movie. Why? Because why not?
It turns 19 years old this year, and we're kind of coming back into a Hellboy renaissance, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to do more Hellboy things. Now, yes, we are talking about the Del Toro 2004, Jesus Christ, that's so old, Hellboy movie.
I know.
Now, you may be thinking, Del Toro, isn't that the man behind Shape of Water and the new Pinocchio film? Yes. And also Blade 2, which I didn't know until I watched Nostalgia Critic, which I'm still blown away. Like, he made Blade 2.
Yes, and it's arguably the best Blade of that franchise.
I actually agree. Now then, so Hellboy is, without a doubt, not just a cult classic in terms of films, but also comic books, because I'm going to have to do a very controversial confession. I've never read a single Hellboy comic. Shame me, people! Shame me! Look, people. I read a lot of comics and manga. You know, there are going to be some that just slip the cracks.
Yeah, no. It's okay. You're not alone. I didn't start reading the Hellboy graphic novels until I was an adult.
Yeah. Now, I will say I've seen images of the artwork. I love the artwork, and I am excited for that new game coming out.
Oh, yes.
So I'm not just someone who's just watched this one Hellboy film. No, I've watched both these films. I've watched some of the animated films. And I have, of course, seen the shameless reboot. But we'll save our thoughts on that another time.
Ditto here. I've grown up with Hellboy. I've seen the first two Del Toro films. I played the second video game with Ron Perlman in it. I watched the two animated features. I did start reading some of the comics. I only got to, I think, the second or third one, but I want to continue. I read the crossover with Batman.
At this point, who hasn't Batman crossed over with? He's teamed up with... He took on all of Team Ruby last week.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to see him fight Vegeta next? I'll pay money to see that.
I would actually love to see that. And I did see the Shameless reboot as well. But unlike most people, I didn't actually spend a dime. I won tickets to it. So, you know, hey,
I'm just
picturing my suffering.
I'm just picturing you're like the only man that walked out so happy from that film. Your friends are like, Richard, why are you so pleased? That film was shit. It was. But I didn't pay for it. Just blowing an air horn as you're walking away.
Exactly, yes. But no,
complete
I did
Chad
rewatch
mood.
So I did rewatch this film yesterday. I forgot there was a director's cut, so that's my B, but I did watch the theatrical cut, and so that way it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah, right then. So, obvious, just like with Judge Dredd, let's talk about the cast. And I don't think this man really needs an introduction. Ron Perlman.
Yes, Ron the Man Perlman.
Just enough said.
So
do we need to introduce him?
Yeah, no. So I was telling Billy off camera, and I wanted to save this for this recording. There's actually a fun story. Ron was actually casted after he worked with Del Toro on Blade 2, because Del Toro saw his performance in Blade 2, and he was like, that's my Hellboy. That's the Hellboy. I found him, and him and Perlman strictly worked together to make this movie. So
that's cool.
Yes, and I also didn't know before Perlman was cast, Jeremy Renner was up for the title role as Hellboy, but he rejected it because he wasn't familiar with the source material.
Oh, is it too hard to just read a few comics? I mean, hell,
I guess it is.
if Henry Cavill can play all the games and read all the books to play Geralt, why can't a man just read a few comics?
Yeah, exactly. So yes, Ron Perlman, he's what carries this movie.
Oh, any film he's in, even if it's bad, it's just he steals the show. Like you mentioned, Blade 2, it's just like the moment he's on screen, it's just like, look, fuck Wesley Snipes, Ron Perlman's here.
Yes, exactly.
Not dissing his role, Wesley Snipes' Blade is iconic, there's no dispute in that. But come on, it's Ron Perlman.
Yeah, no, and also too, I want to talk about his performance in this movie is so very good, especially when you consider the fact that he had to go through hours and hours of makeup, and his performance is so nuanced and so subtle that he really sells the emotions he's in. Like, even before you see him, like you can feel his presence, and as soon as he steps out, I love this little Easter egg that Del Toro did. When we first see him, he's actually in the same outfit that he is in the comic books. He's just wearing shorts, and you can see his devil little legs at the bottom. Obviously, there's CG, but we do get to see him in his classic Hellboy design, just for a brief moment, and I like that. I never noticed that as a kid.
I think you also were going to mention this. So one of the big worries was because Hellboy's rock hand is in his right hand, they were worried that the actor was going to be right-handed and he needed to use a revolver. Then Ron was just like, oh, no worries, I'm left-handed, bruv.
Yeah.
So it was just so there we go.
there you go, yes.
It's like, don't need to do a change.
No, exactly. That's very convenient. But
I mean, sure, it's more accurate to the source material, but I will admit, even if Ron Perlman wasn't left-handed, it wouldn't have been so much of an it. Do you really think people would have been mad if, like, Hellboy was right-handed? Like, who would have cared that much?
I mean, back then, Hellboy was such a niche character, so really, I couldn't have seen it being a big deal.
Yeah.
But, no. I mean, and this movie is essentially a light adaptation, so really, yeah, I would have been okay with it because it's Ron Perlman.
Now, of course, I guess we'll segue into the film, but let's start off with asking the important question. Is Hellboy good? And we are going to pretty much fanboy over this. Yes, Hellboy, I'm going to even say it, Hellboy is perhaps one of not just the most underrated superhero and comic stories, it's an unknown masterpiece, really.
Yes, absolutely. I would say this movie is great. It is an unknown masterpiece, as you said. It came out in the time where comic book films were starting to come back, and it's funny that this movie came out the same year as Spider-Man 2 and a year before Batman Begins, because it was kind of like a little sleeper hit that just snuck up out of nowhere.
Similar to his comic books, because even when his comics were still coming out, he was going up against Spider-Man, Superman, and all the rest. But he was still like a cult classic.
Exactly, yes. And I legit have no problems with this film. I have no flaws. I think in 2 hours, they managed to tell the story they're wanting to tell. Yes, it is not a one-to-one adaptation of the first graphic novel, Seed of Destruction, which does get a name drop in the first half of the film. Yeah. But it's not as if Del Toro, because Del Toro, he still understands the source material. So he sticks to the adaptation. He pretty much digs in his hands and he says, I'm going to keep it as faithful, but I'm going to tell my story. So it's the best of both worlds.
Now, I will say, because, okay, as about it being flawless, there are some issues, but for me, the only issue I have is the CGI. Now, I won't say this movie doesn't have good effects, because there are some good effects, mainly practical, which we'll get into. So, right, so, yeah, one of the big things people have said, and this is what kind of sparked one of the director of the reboots, was that he wanted to stick more to the grittier side and, the violent side of the graphic novels. But in all honesty, I feel like that just felt more like... Best way to sum it up, you know how, like, the Boys TV show is really well written, but they only use the violence when it's, like, necessary to the plot, whereas the comic books were just all violence with no... To the point it was just annoying to look at.
Yeah, it was style over substance, essentially.
And yeah, this film, I think in America, isn't Hellboy 2004 PG?
I think it is. I would have to look up its official rating to absolutely be sure, but it does kind of feel like it's PG.
Yeah, well, I mean, over here in the UK, it's rated 12, or maybe 15, depending on director's cut. However, good old Del Toro...
Oh, okay, here in America... I'm sorry, quick correction. Here in America, it was classified a PG-13.
Okay, then. And some people are like, oh, isn't that kind of upsetting? Listen, this is Del Toro we're talking about. He might not be able to show a full-on Mortal Kombat, someone getting a spine ripped off. In this film, though, he's gotten away with some pretty gruesome deaths. Sure, there's no blood, but like when some of the men are being eaten alive, when that one German scientist gets launched into that sphere and you see him suffering as he gets incinerated, like, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, no, there are creative way. There is still death in this movie, but it's done tastefully and creatively instead of just, I'm going to have it be brutal as fucking possible. And I think that fits into the overall to Del Toro's style. He doesn't want to just have gore for the sake of it. He wants to go further than that and actually have it be somewhat romanticized and somewhat laid back, because the stakes are high, but that doesn't mean that we have to just have gore, mountains and pools of blood everywhere. It can be subdued, and I think that that's what works best about this first film is the violence. There is some, but it's subdued. It's very minimal. It comes off as it might as well be a graphic novel come to life.
Yeah, like, sure, the deaths, what I like about it is it spaces out the deaths well. So when you see like one of Hellboy's allies get killed, it's like an oh no moment because you were kind of rooting for them. Or it's like a shock factor. Like there was one character I was surprised got killed off, which was like his original handler. Like I really thought he was just going to be off screen most of the time. And then when he's in it, you can see like the bond between them. And it was just sad when you saw him get killed by the I can't remember his name. I think the mechanical assassin's called like Carl or something.
Let me see. Yeah, let me see here.
But yeah, so when there's someone who dies, or even if it's just a bystander, like I remember one scene, one guy is just standing there and he gets knocked off by a giant trap. You feel bad for him, even though it's not brutal. Though seeing him plummet to his death, it's like, man, you didn't want that to happen.
No, yeah, exactly. You care about the supporting characters in this film, and and I gotta say, I love how the supporting characters are handled in this.
Yeah. Before we actually get to that, let's actually talk about the cast himself. So we've already said Hellboy, played by Ron Perlman. I was nearly about to say Hellboy playing Ron Perlman. Little did people know, he's actually Hellboy in the movie, but in real life he plays as Ron.
Yes.
But, so yeah, enough said, he's a really good character. Doug Jones playing as Abe. Abe is a really underrated character, man. He's just so likable, and I feel like he's kind of like an unintentional comedic relief. Like when Hellboy kills that monster at first, the immortal thing, he's walking away and then Abe's like, oh look, they're called the Undying. And Ron Perlman's reaction, I like the fact he wasn't scared, but it was more so an, oh shit. He's like, I did not like the sound of that.
Yeah, exactly. The Hound of Resurrection. I love that line. That was very good. And I actually want to add another fun fact about Abe in this movie. So it is commonly known that Doug Jones, obviously he did the body performance for Abe, but in this first film, he actually didn't do the voice. He was dubbed over by David Hyde Pierce. David Hyde Pierce, he did the voice, but he was uncredited because for whatever reason, he did not want to be credited in this movie because he felt that it was entirely Doug's creation, and he wanted to stay true to that and let Doug kind of have his own thing. So he not only refused to take a credit in the film, he refused to promote the film. He didn't even show up to the premiere of the film. He was that determined to stay in anonymity, all for the sake of Doug Jones taking the credit of bringing this character to life physically.
Wow, that is an absolute Chad right there.
Yes, just imagine if James Earl Jones did not take credit for voicing Darth Vader, if he just wanted everybody to believe that the body performer should get the credit because they're the ones who have to wear the suit, have to do the combat. So he was just like, I'm okay if people don't know my name.
Oh, that is actually kind of cool.
Yes, but going forward, Doug Jones actually would do the voice of Abe, and I swear, it sounds similar, but again, I love that little fact. So yeah, Abe is my favorite character.
I might notice a difference when I watch the second one.
Yeah, I think we would notice the difference, but either way, I do love. Okay, you had your nitpick with the CG. My nitpick is with Abe and how he's here, but I kind of liked how he played a bigger role in the sequel. Here he's good.
His role in this film was more the supporting character, which apparently that was kind of his role in the comics as well. He didn't get too much moments. But at the same time, I kind of get what you mean, though, because in the second film, he's really good, and he actually has some really funny moments as well. Whereas this one, he just kind of feels like you're like, what's her name from Splinter Cell, who aids Sam Fisher?
I'll
put her on screen, but yeah, he kind of just feels like that. Like, I won't lie, though, the practical effects on him are brilliant, but I can maybe imagine it was too expensive at the time, and they had to mostly just focus on Hellboy. Which, we'll get through the rest of the cast, because I do want to just talk about the effects in this film, and then we'll get to the story. Right, and so John Hurt playing as the Professor. Now, if you've only known Hellboy through the reboot and how you've seen Hellboy's dad, and you're just thinking, this guy's a fucking asshole. This version of the Professor is nothing like that.
Yes.
He's like Hellboy and Professor... what's Professor Broom? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, Professor Broom. Yes, it's Professor Broom.
They really do feel like a father-son dynamic. Like, the moment like you have that time skip and Hellboy saying he's still mad at me, he goes on the mission smoking a cigar, and then he's just standing and he just hides the cigar behind his back. So I was like, that is pure father-son energy right there.
Yeah.
All badass to his colleagues, like, yeah, I'm a demon. It's like, oh, fuck, it's my dad. But you can clearly see, though, the Professor wasn't, like, shunning him. He was like, hello, Hellboy, but still, like, unlike in the reboot where he was, like, condescending, patronizing him, this one he really did feel like a father, and, spoiler alerts, when he dies, you can see how much Hellboy's hurt from it. Even though they don't show too much screen time, the two, you really feel the father-son connection, unlike in the reboot where they got more screen time together. It's really shocking, really, that this film that's way older than the reboot just did the father-son dynamic way better.
No, I got to agree with you. When he died, because throughout this film and the second one and the animated features, John Hurt really brings that father love and that wisdom to this character that... Honestly, whether it was a part of the comics or not, I want to say it was originally a part of the comics. I do appreciate, because especially when we see his death, like, he knows he's going to die. So he takes the quick and painless way. And whether or not he knows that this is going to inspire Hellboy to take the right path in life, I just love that moment, because when we see it, it's quiet. There's no dialogue. There's just the music and the ambience and the urgency of it. And when Hellboy sinks down, like this is also attributed to Ron, the emotions are played very well. It's not just, oh, he dies, Hellboy shows up, he grieves for a minute, and then it cuts. No, they slow this moment down. We actually breathe with the characters, and we see how Professor Broom's death impacts everybody at the agency.
Yeah,
and
he was
I
like an
love
important
that.
figure for starting the whole thing.
Yes, exactly. So it really was nice to see them handle that with such care. And I really do feel like that is something that, okay, we kind of skim over these days. We skim over the parental figure dying, and it's just used as motivation for the character to beat up the bad guy. There's never a moment where it is allowed to breathe. And I like that.
Yeah,
I feel like Del Toro did a great job with it.
I feel like a lot of Marvel films, even these days, before people say, I'm not an MCU hater, I'm just saying, like, you know what, the parent sort of figure in this movie just does a lot of things better than what a lot of MCU movies do, where someone important might die, and you're given a moment of the characters being sad. I will say, No Way Home did it really well, so before anyone's like, what about No Way Home? Yes, No Way Home did it really well. But just other films just really kind of gloss over like the character deaths. Like it happens. It's like happens. They got to spend at least 2 minutes on it, but then it's like it doesn't happen. Like it doesn't impact the rest of the story. So the other characters, I'll just briefly mention them, and then we'll talk about the villains, because the villains are kind of other issues I have with this film. So Selma Blair as the girlfriend of Hellboy, Liz. I feel she was much better in the sequel, but I'm not gonna. She wasn't bad in this film, but it was kind of like how I felt about Dredd's sidekick in the previous one. What the fuck is her name? Anderson. Yeah, she kind of just felt like the Anderson, where she's there, she has her moments, but really you're just there for Hellboy. And this is a hot take from me. Is it Rupert or Robert Evans?
Rupert Evans.
Yeah, who plays as John Myers. This might be a hot take. I didn't really like him in this film. So I get it. He's kind of meant to be like the sort of audience sort of character, Hellboy's already an established character, and they kind of did a good job introducing this character through like the montages they showed. So John Myers is meant to be that character that's just meant to be sort of like the audience, first-hand experience in him. Just got to silence my Discord because okay, shall we record another time then?
Yes, I'm sorry. It was unexpected. I didn't know.
All right. Yes, we are still talking same day. We're not talking another day. That was a flawless transition. I'm in my same clothing as is Richard.
Yeah,
Yeah, flawless transition. Yeah, we're totally talking the same day.
Yeah, no, I totally didn't get blue highlights. I totally still have the same hair. I'm totally not confused.
Right then. So back onto the topic before we all had our lives to live. Okay, so yeah, the side characters aren't necessarily bad characters, and I feel like they do serve a purpose to the plot. So, I mean,
they do.
But of course,
just I feel like their purposes were better in the second one.
Yeah, I do feel like they definitely got more chances to shine. Well, except for Wheeler, he kind of he just kind of got written out of that film, didn't he?
Myers, yeah, he did.
Myers,
they
I don't know why I said Wheeler.
That he got transferred to the Ark. No, it's fine.
It was kind of weird that he got written out.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe the actor didn't want to come back, or maybe Del Toro just didn't see any use for Myers in the second one. I don't know.
I suppose. But let's get on to the villain of this film, and it is Rasputin.
Yes, Rasputin.
Now, I kind of have to ask this because I know a little bit of Rasputin because he was a real-life person. But why are so many movies and TV shows always obsessed with using him for the villain? He's an evil person. I'm not trying to defend the guy. But why is it he's always the go-to when they want some Russian bad guy? I mean, you rarely see ones about Hitler, I mean, God, I guarantee in like 80 years, Putin himself's going to be like a villain for a movie. Hellboy 3, fight for Ukraine. Hey, to be honest, Hellboy taking on Putin, I would watch that. I would watch that.
I would do. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I always kind of found that a bit weird. Like, it's no stranger, you know, when movies or TV shows use real life dictators or evil people for, like, you know, the cogwheel for the story to unravel. But why is Rasputin like always the number one pick?
Well, to be fair, I mean, he was the villain in the original story, and the original story does have that, because Hellboy's origins are tied with World War II, so it makes sense that Rasputin would be the villain. And he is the quote-unquote father of Hellboy.
To an extent,
or at least he's responsible for bringing him into this world. Yeah, so I can understand it, but I really think to talk about his role, it's been a while since I've read Seed of Destruction, so I can't remember if this is exactly how his role was in the comic or the graphic novel, excuse me. But I just found Rasputin to be kind of underwhelming in this film. Am I the only one?
No, I don't think he's underwhelming. He serves the purpose, but I think he's kind of like an early MCU villain, where their only purpose is just to kickstart the franchise and to start the main hero's character development. Because at this point, Hellboy is already part of this organization, he's seen some shit, but he's never really understood his purpose until Rasputin, the man who literally tried to open the gates of hell, which was his origins into this world. So,
that is a good point, but I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I just like villains who are more involved, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, in saying that though, like his henchmen are actually quite memorable. Like that mechanical guy, which in the comics he was a German scientist who tried to make himself immortal. You wouldn't really know that in this film. He just comes off as just your standard badass assassin for the main villain type of role. They're just there to be badass, kick the hero's ass a bit, then just get a dramatic death.
Yeah, he also serves a good purpose of motivating Hellboy into taking revenge for the death of his father. Which I like. It does. It serves a good purpose, and again, it is responsible for that great emotional death scene we talked about. But that's just it. I feel like Carl, which that's his name. I'm not even gonna bother to pronounce his last name. I'm like,
no, you actually right.
As everyone
Carl
knows, okay, yeah. Well, I meant his last name. His first name's Carl.
Yeah, I'll put it on screen. But yeah, it's a hard. I'm part German as well, but even I'm just like, yeah, I'm not even gonna bother.
Yeah, so I liked Carl as a sub-antagonist. I feel like he really did. He brought a lot to this movie in terms of, okay, he had the most badass scenes, he was responsible for Hellboy's father's death, and there was clearly a good sense of relief when Hellboy finally got his revenge. But then you have Rasputin, and he's just there. I'm not saying he doesn't have presence. He very much does. I wanted more of him. And I also get the same way with his second lieutenant slash love interest.
Yeah,
maybe?
I think it's
Alicia?
kind of. Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious she's meant to be the love interest. She's just meant to be that other. She's meant to be like the little gremlin sort of sidekick to the villain who's obsessed with their leader. So, yeah, they're by the numbers, but that's not to say they aren't memorable. They have some pretty good lines. They have some good scenes, but I think they just have that whole how I explain it, starting a franchise type of villain. Because when you think about movie franchises, Iron Man, what was his most memorable villain? Honestly, Whiplash in the second film, whereas the Ironmonger, not so much. He was just meant to be the motivation to get Iron Man to become the hero. Similar with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Green Goblin, while entertaining as fuck, let's be real here, he was just there just to start the franchise. ironic given the fact the Green
I
Goblin's
can understand.
one of the biggest Spider-Man villains of all time. So to use him for the first film was a baller move.
That's true, but I also just feel like it's a case of, like, look, we had a lot of great early 2000s villains. We had the Green Goblin, we had Ra's al Ghul, we had the Doctor Octopus. We even had the second vampire badass in Blade 2. So it's just like, okay, I kind of feel like if I were to just rank all the early 2000s comic book villains, I would put Rasputin somewhere at the bottom because, again, ultimately, his purpose, like that, it's to make Hellboy realize who he is. He's not a demon who is meant to bring hell to Earth. He is the son of a man who took him in. And I feel like he does accomplish that well, but ultimately, he gets axed off. He gets symbolically, I don't know if it's symbolically or ironic, I guess we can take a pick, but he gets stabbed by Hellboy, and then the creature that's inside him just releases, and it's like, bye Rasputin.
Yeah, that will go into sort of my complaint about the finale, because honestly, as far as I think of this film, I think it's almost flawless until the end of the film, but we'll get to that as we're talking about the story. So, the story just starts off with them trying to kill these immortal monsters. Turns out, though, those monsters serve a much more bigger purpose than just wreaking havoc.
Right.
One thing I didn't really address about Hellboy and his organization. Now, especially a lot of 2000 and even 80s movies, you always got those organizations and superhero stores, even just police forces, where they're like, you know, the hero's like a rogue guy who doesn't really care for his fellow officers, even when they die, which is kind of fucked up. Even a lot of current MCU films, they don't really show that much respect when, like, a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. dies in a horrible way. Whereas Hellboy, on the other hand, every single member of his organization, he has an attachment to. Because realistically, these men are just meant to be, like, supernatural cops. And in the real world, many police stations have a connection with every police officer. They're not just nameless people that are just there to be bullet sponges. So when they hear the news one of them's died, it's heartbreaking. And Hellboy treats it like the scene when the immortal monsters kill those three off. Well, actually, no. The first one was killed by Carl, and that guy goes, 2 are dead, and one of them might not make it. How the business is. Hellboy, rather than just being, we need to get revenge, he's like, no. You don't talk about those men like that. You know, those men that I've known for a long time. Like, you can see he's really offended of it. It's like, yeah, no, don't talk shit about my mates. It's like, they're dead. Show some respect.
No, I like that. Especially, I feel like the movie did a great job of having Hellboy's reaction, just like you said. But I feel like the one that really you could tell stung for Hellboy out of the men that he lost that he was close with was Clay, because it's established at the start of the film, him and Clay, they have respect for one another. They joke, they take the piss at each other. But you can tell that Clay is a friend of Hellboy's. Now, whether or not he's his best friend, that's kind of up for debate, but he is a friend. And when Abe gets hurt, Hellboy's also kind of like distraught because, again, you have that great scene where he's just looking at Abe's healing tank and he's just alone he's gathering his thoughts. And then Manny has to just say, you know, cut the tension or just, you know, rub salt in the wounds by saying, he'll make it. Not everyone was so lucky. And then you have that great scene, like you said, where Hellboy's like, hey, I knew those men. And then Manning has that great line. Oh, okay, well, that makes it okay. And then Hellboy fires back. No, that doesn't make it okay. But I stopped that thing.
It's a really good moment because you get a lot of movies where there's collateral damage and some of the heroes, you know, they get sad about it, but there's never like a personal attachment. But whereas Hellboy, it's like, just like I mentioned earlier, when a police officer loses a partner or even someone in the office, you know, that's like a harsh moment. It's not like Grand Theft Auto where they have like 30 other police officers on standby for combat. It's like, no, he's known these guys since he was a child. So to see one of them get killed off so gruesomely, that's... In the second film, they continued that with the Tooth Fairies. When he sees one of them eaten alive, he's horrified.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I also think that this and RoboCop do a great job of having a great collateral damage and showing the characters' reactions to everything that's going around. And I really feel like that's the testament of Toro because again, he makes you care about the characters that you know are gonna die, but
Yeah.
Hellboy is just not Hellboy's just not just he's not reacting to it. He's literally taking a moment and he's just reflecting on these people that I knew that I was close with. They died, and I couldn't be there to save them because I do partially believe that Hellboy, when you have that scene that we're talking about, he does blame himself that he couldn't save Clay, that he couldn't save the agents, and that he couldn't be there to help out Abe. He takes that as a huge, huge loss on himself, and he carries it.
Later on in the film as well, when that other random nobody agent gets killed by that trap, all because, I can't remember his name. The bald guy. I forgot his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he's like
Manny.
Manny. So when they're like giving off, when he's trying to give off orders, and then I will admit it's kind of comedic, but it's also kind of sad. You hear the man screaming as he's plummeting to his death. Hellboy just looks at Manny like, "That's on you." Like, yeah,
Yeah, no.
well done. You just
Well,
got
I
another
also-
good man killed.
I
Well
also
done.
well, I also want to talk about how Manning and Hellboy's relationship actually kind of grows in this film. Their working relationship, that is, because
Yeah,
they start off they're not the biggest fans of each other. They're not buddies.
no, one has to constantly have to keep covering up that Hellboy's just a myth spread by social media, fake news.
Yeah, exactly. And Manning sees Hellboy as just an irresponsible child who can't be professional and can't keep his public image out of the public. And Hellboy just sees Manning as a huge jackass who just barks orders and has no importance to him. But when you have that scene where they're facing off against Carl and Manny saves Hellboy, that's great character development. It shows that Manny isn't just a jackass for the sake of it. No, this dude will put his life on the line if he absolutely feels like he has to, and I like that. And then you get that great scene where Manny's teaching him how to properly light a cigar.
Yeah, I do think the second film kind of ruined their friendship a little bit.
Oh yes, no, absolutely.
Which we'll get to in the
definitely
future.
have to keep that. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that because I have something to say about that too. That is one of my complaints with that film. But anyway, yeah.
So
the story for this it's good.
yeah, like, okay, is it Shakespearean? Is it big? Is it magnificent? It's like, no, you're getting what you're paid for, but you're also getting a small treat with it. It's like you go to a restaurant expecting, like a burger. You go to a burger restaurant expecting, burgers and fries, but there's a little bit of something sprinkled in the middle. It's like, you know what? It may be just a burger, but honestly, it's probably one of the best burgers I've ever had.
Yeah, that's actually a good way of putting it. It's not even fucking Nolan or Raimi for God's sakes, but that's just it. Del Toro proves that he can compete with people like Nolan and Raimi in the comic book genre because he knows how to have a film have a story. He knows how to properly write a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and he knows how to keep you engaged. Because I got to tell you, this story feels like it could drag on theoretically, but it doesn't. It does have a good pace to it.
Yeah, which I feel like Del Toro's always nailed with his films. Like, when you think, is the film going to start and suddenly get very slow? It's like, no, suddenly something's happened. Pay attention, son. Like, Abe swimming underwater just collecting eggs. It just seems like a pointless scene. But then when he drops his, like, rusty thing, he accidentally wakes up one of the demons. And it's a really tense chase. And I will say, I know the CGI, people have dissed it, but when it's the underwater bit with Abe, it's really good. But obviously, it has the effect of being underwater, so you can... Sort of like when they do CGI fights at nighttime, you can hide a lot of the faults. But it is really tense. Like, first time watching it, I was really thinking, like, oh god, is Abe going to make it? Because even though Abe's a fast swimmer, that thing chasing him is much faster, and they really show just how dangerous it can be, not just on land, but in the water. where you'd think Abe would just
Absolutely.
you'd think Abe would just excel at, because it's like, oh, he's a sea creature, so he should know these walks. No, he's panicking. He's like bumping into things and mass panic, which is realistic, because if you're being chased by something, you are going to have a moment. You're going to stumble because you're in a panic trying to find safety.
Well, the one thing I also want to bring up that I feel like these films nail better than, say, the Nolan Batman films and are on par with Sam Raimi is the crowd's reaction to Hellboy.
Yeah.
Like, you... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because it's kind of realistic and the same way. Because I know people always like to go on the story, like, people would freak out when they see a monster and stuff like that, which there are some that do. But you also just get people that are just fascinated by him. It's just like, okay, this is interesting. This Saturday went from me doing a boring job at McDonald's to suddenly I'm seeing a red man fight a squid monster.
Yeah, because you get that. Obviously, you get the scene where Hellboy, like throughout the times we see Hellboy in public, he's obviously just not paying attention. Like the first time we see him out in public, he's trying to catch Samael through the crowds. Myers has to cover it up, telling people it's just Halloween costumes. And then you get that moment where Hellboy stops an SUV from hitting Myers. Then you get that other scene that is an extension of it, where Hellboy's trying to get Samael, but he's caught in the train, and he's holding on for dear life, and the train conductor just bashes him in the head with the fire extinguisher, and Hellboy's like, I'm on your side!
Yeah, that moment is pretty funny. I feel like the humour in this film, it's not cringy or forced, because Hellboy's very nonchalant about a lot of things, which makes for a lot of comedic moments. Like when he kills the monster for the first time, he's like, yeah, I got it, because, he's seen shit, so he just saw this as another monster. But then when Avery's like, oh, look, a resurrection, he's just like, I did not like the sound of it. And
I don't like that.
They did do a little, he's right behind me, isn't he? It's just like, no, it's like, he heard what Abe said, stopped, took a breath, it's just like, oh, shit. Like,
yeah,
it feels natural,
and I also...
it feels natural and realistic.
It does, yes. Honestly, my favorite joke from Hellboy is the opening, where Myers is handed the original comic in which Hellboy debuted in, and he's like, never liked them comics. They can never get the eyes right. It's like, yeah. It's like that's legit. That's funny, but that's on Ron Perlman. He knows how to deliver those comedic lines perfectly.
Not only that, just a build up to Hellboy, because in the most of the film they're building up Hellboy to be this like scary monster and stuff like that. Then you see his warehouse. He's having like 5 stacks of pancakes, bacon, and a large pot of soup, and he has loads of cats around him.
Cats, tons, yes, tons of cats.
Yeah, it's like he's smoking a cigar and trying to look all badass, but it's like, look, man, you're a child, man. Look at that stack of bacon you got now.
Yeah, exactly. And I also just love how there are stakes. Like the stake. It is kind of a little weird that this movie has to have the end of the world stake thrown into it, because I'm a person who likes a first movie to be kind of low key, very personal. But it manages to do it surprisingly well, to where it doesn't feel formulaic, at least in my opinion. I mean, because I realize a lot of people get tired of that. I mean, that's why something like Man of Steel really didn't hit home for people, because it's literally, I have to stop Zod before he terraforms Earth into New Krypton. It's like, isn't that a bit isn't that a bit much for a Superman film to start with?
I feel like
you don't go big, you start small.
I feel like a lot of superhero movies, I get it, it raises the stakes, but a lot of films, I feel like, depend on your characters. Like, yeah, Hellboy is meant to be the warrior of hell, and he is meant to, be the deciding factor whether Earth will be destroyed or not. But at the same time,
I mean,
you don't want your biggest threat to be in the very first film, because then you have the obstacle like, how do we go further? Because with trilogies, movies have to up the ante. Like the Dark Knight trilogy, you had Ra's al Ghul, which, yeah, he was, powerful, but it was more so he was a deadly assassin, whereas the Joker was a chaotic villain. Like, he was trying to bring Gotham to its knees. Then you had the third film where Bane accomplished that, and he beat the Batman. Like that was raising the stakes in a good way. Whereas, I mean, to be fair though, Hellboy did raise the stakes in its second film as well, but obviously not on the level that it was in the first film.
No, but I feel like it did a good job of having the stakes be more personal and than just, hey, this Hellboy is being baited to bring about the end of the world, and we're going to see this giant Cthulhu monster in the sky essentially cause havoc and turn Earth into literal hell.
Yeah.
But, again, that is all, and it's funny too because when the 2019 reboot tried to do the exact same thing, it honestly it didn't feel like it was earned. It didn't feel like it had a natural progression. It just felt like they had to do that because the film didn't. Obviously, when we get to that film just had a whole bunch of developmental hell. But Del Toro does a good job of making sure that, okay, if I'm going to do an end of the world stake climax, I don't want it to feel like it's coming out of nowhere. I want it to have proper build-up and payoff.
Yeah, which I guess that will be a good segue into talking about the final finale of this movie. And you know what? Most of it was pretty good. You know, we have all the heroes together. We're about to take on Rasputin and his army, quote unquote. But really, it's just Carl and then the weird Cthulhu monster, which, when it got to the Cthulhu monster, I kind of felt like the film kind of fell flat there for me.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, I liked the build-up of, okay, we have the team that's assembled, and, you know, it tricks you into thinking it's going to be a simple end climax with the gang going in there with the Vulcan grenade belt, and then they pull the pin, the timer goes off, boom, all of the Samaels are dead, and that's it. They save the world. Plus, they take down Rasputin and Carl in the process too.
Carl,
but no, instead,
people.
Carl gets killed off immediately. So therefore, Hellboy's revenge arc is kind of complete. And
it was a pretty good death, though. It was pretty. Like I was thinking.
Oh no!
Like he gets punched in the head, impaled, and then crushed by a giant cog. I mean, no. That's one way to kill a man.
Yeah, no, Carl he was a badass. And then after the explosion, and then Hellboy is just locked up in a chain that won't unlock unless he reveals his real name to free the Cthulhu monster and cause hell to save Liz's life. It just like it does. It feels like, I don't know. Maybe there was I may have to go back and look, but maybe the extended edition did a better job of this. But the theatrical version just came off as like, oh, maybe. Well, this is kind of a switch and bait.
Now, I will say this is probably a hot take on how I wanted this film to end. So he's opened the gates of hell, but you know. He gets that big speech about, you know, you don't have to be this weapon. You are your own man. And does probably the most sickest thing ever. He tears off his horns and stabs Rasputin. If it literally just ended there, no giant monster, I would have been okay with that. Because you teased what could be coming in the future. You showed the monsters of hell, but once he decided no, you know, you set up the next few films and you defeated the main villain. And like that, we already had a pretty cool badass fight against Carl. Sure, some people are like,
I feel like,
is it a bit short? But on one hand, I'm like, that's it. He's done everything. He got his revenge. He stopped Rasputin, and the film hinted to the next few villains. Like, we don't need anything else.
Okay, well, even better. What if we didn't have, like, you can have that moment where Elisa knocks out Hellboy and Liz tries to kill whatever Samael she can, but you reveal that, okay, she didn't get all of them, she only got a few of them, and then when Rasputin is stabbed, along with Elisa staying by him, Hellboy is able to pull the pin, and then that kills all of the remaining Samaels, plus Rasputin and Elisa, and that way it feels like, okay, that actually was. We prevented hell from coming, but we now know that, okay, Hellboy came this close to being his true self. And that kind of sets up what was ultimately going to be the main payoff of this original planned trilogy.
Yeah.
Like, the foundation still could have been set, but we didn't have to go that far into it, is what I'm saying. And hell, you could have had Myers still be the hero. He could have been the one that escaped and pulled, and maybe sacrificed himself and pulled the pins. Because again, you want to have tension in a moment like that.
Maybe. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I still say this film's really good. Like, the action sequences. Now, of course, we are going to get some critiques, and of course, you know, could there still be another third Hellboy film? But we might be given some bad news on that. So let's, of course, talk about. We've talked about the story and the characters. What about the effects for it? I think my only major complaint, when it is the practical effects, mwah, they are beautiful. I've always said this. Practical effects will always look good. Because, sure, there are some films out there where they make both the CGI and practical effects look good. Jurassic Park and even Jurassic World look pretty good. But of course, the only reason they were successful was budget and, of course, you know, a passionate team behind it. But now, I'm not saying this film didn't have a passionate team behind it. It did, but of course they missed the other part, the budget. Because the studio did not think Hellboy was going to be a big hit.
I mean, they gave. I mean, this movie had a budget of $60 to $66 million, which that's a lot. That's not a lot compared to back then. I mean, hell, Christopher Nolan's first Batman film, that was given a budget of over $150 million. That's like 3 times the amount. You could make 3 Hellboy movies with that kind of a budget. But I respect that because it's like, it's like you said, they didn't know if this would be a surefire hit. So giving it such a low budget like that is good. But it still doesn't look that cheap. The computer effects, they are noticeable. They're dated, especially with Samael. When it's in camera, you actually do see a puppet animatronic of Samael. But when it has to move with the action sequences, it's obvious it's a computer-generated effect. And another thing I would like to...
Carl, one of the big things was, for some reason, they CGI'd his eyes. Because when he's on the table being autopsied, honestly, the costume looks good. Now, of course, if they couldn't do anything with the eyes, my personal thing would be, don't show the eyes. You know, but honestly, the practical effects on this costume look so good. I truly look like I'm looking at a mummified corpse of a man trying to keep himself alive. And, of course, practical effects on Hellboy. Like, a lot of films these days, especially with a lot of superhero films, they either go the extra mile, just use CGI on a lot of them, but you can tell that the makeup artist really wanted Ron Perlman to look like Hellboy. Sure, does he look 100% like the comic character? No. But the only thing that's really not accurate is the eyes. That's it.
Yeah.
Sure, he's not as big.
He is wearing yellow contact lenses.
Yeah, I mean, Also, his size, he's not as big, but Hugh Jackman wasn't the size of Wolverine from the comics. Was he a bad Wolverine just because he was taller?
As somebody who has actually met and stood toe to toe next to Ron Perlman, I can tell you that this guy is not fucking he's not a little shrimp. Trust me. He made me look like a little shrimp.
No, I meant like in terms of like Hellboy in the comic books. Because in the Injustice comics, he towers nearly over everyone except Darkseid. But of course, no. Ron Perlman's still a big lad. But obviously, you know, they couldn't make him look any taller for this film because, again, budget. But at the same time, though, the practical effects on him still look good.
I would say the other noticeable effects that really kind of stand out in a way, it's like, I can kind of, like, even with CG, that still looks pretty noticeable, is the wire effects. Like, when Hellboy got pushed or punched back to where he's flying backwards in a motion, you can actually see the wire effect. Like, they're covered up, but you still see it's like, I can see that's a wire pulling him. That doesn't look good.
There are a lot of films that I think suffered that back then. Like, even movies like Jason versus Freddy Krueger, like, you could tell they did, like, it shows one character get punched and suddenly it looks like they're being pulled by the force. And yeah, this film
Yeah,
is guilty of
exactly.
that.
And
It never really looks like
there also
they're
is
being
a
flown across
sorry,
the
go ahead.
room like from that punch. It looks like they got punched and then they just started flying.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a moment where when Hellboy is tailing Myers and Liz on their what he believes is a date, you see that moment where he jumps after he's flabbergasted, upset, pissed off, little disappointed that Liz took his picture. He makes the leap, and you can tell that it's like, okay, yeah, that's CG. That
Yeah.
is this.
I
That's
mean,
CG.
because it's
And
at
even the end.
because it's at nighttime though, I think it's not as noticeable, but obviously if you're looking for flaws, then yeah, you would see it does look a bit off.
Yeah, and again, that end climax, I mean, as some
Oh.
critics pointed out, it does just evolve into two CGI creatures fighting because, yeah, I don't believe even with a higher budget they could have pulled off Ron in the makeup having to fight a puppet version of this Cthulhu monster. With the tentacles and the face and all that, and have the rest be CG. No, they would have had to make it full CG, and that is
Yeah.
kind of disappointing because, like, and it's sad too because, like, man, this came out the same year as Spider-Man 2, and I'm not trying to put this film's climax down in the dirt, but it's like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2's climax is much more actually better than this film.
Yeah, I think it's
But,
where they just felt like they needed a bigger climax, but the problem with that is because they had to just solely rely on CGI. Now, I will say, it's not a bad fight in itself. Like, it's entertaining to watch, but it just has that bad benefit
but it's
because
too
it's
short.
No, the problem is because it's in this like film, which most of the practical effects looked really good. Then it really feels like it just went into a PS3 video game for a moment. Because yeah, it just looked like
or PS2.
yeah. I don't know. I feel like it still looks better than like a lot of PS2 games, but it does just feel like
I say that ironically because this came out when the PS2 was still in its life cycle.
oh god, yeah. Well, God, I feel old.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But no. You are absolutely right. I feel like that's the one thing that Del Toro definitely took criticism well. And okay, so people weren't that, all that fussed about the end climax of the first movie, so I'm gonna make it better in the second movie. And he did. It was much better.
Again, no, put a pin on it. Don't worry, people. We will discuss this board of pins. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Because there's a lot of things the second film did that were really good, and it is a tragedy that it just didn't do well enough for its third film.
Exactly, yes. So I did. I think the effects in this movie, honest to God, if I had to, just say this, I would say the effects in this movie, while they're dated and while, yeah, they're obvious nowadays, especially almost 20 years later, they're still much better than the effects work that Marvel puts out with their current films, because that's really what I noticed.
I'll tell you honestly, the only Marvel CGI, current Marvel CGI thing that I think is a little off looking is She-Hulk. As much as I found that show entertaining, I couldn't I was one of the few people who was like, couldn't they just make up that lady and just made her larger? I mean, would that really have hurt the show?
Yeah, no, well, not even She-Hulk. I just feel like Marvel films and sometimes bad DC films in general, like, they just have that. Okay, I think we've come to this age now where when we look back on early computer generated effects, with Hellboy, for example, the effects are charming. They have their charm, and they're not overly cringy, and they don't stand out as eye gouging. Like, you look at something like this and you compare it to just throwing a random bad DC or Marvel film. Okay, Joss Whedon's Justice League, or the second event, or the Avengers Endgame. You can tell that, okay, yeah, these films and their effects, they needed more time. And I can obviously tell that that's CG. It's not even funny how much I can see the green screen. But with this, I feel like, okay, yeah, it's dated, but I kind of like it.
There is a lot of moments I was surprised with green screen, Because like the bit where Hellboy's on top of the building with a child, no, they were. I was really thinking they're on the top of a building just recording that. No, that was a green screen. It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
actually kind of cool. I think they utilised it when it was necessary, whereas a lot of films,
exactly,
they could like. There's a lot of shots in a lot of films where I'm like, oh, they could have actually gone to that bit, recorded that, and called it a day. But no, it's like, no, we have to do it in a green screen room. Even The Last of Us TV show's kind of guilty of this, but they also knew, just like this film, when to utilise like the big shots.
Exactly. Well, again, and I want to repeat a sentiment I said earlier. Del Toro, Nolan, and Raimi are the masters of knowing what can be done within camera and what can be done in CG. They don't overcompensate with the CG to where the practical element is lost in translation. Like, I feel like they know how to have them both be in tangent with one another to where it's a symbiotic relationship between old school filmmaking and new school of filmmaking.
Yeah, like we said,
they
practical
have style
effects.
is what I'm ultimately trying to say.
Yeah. Like, yeah, and not only that, just like what we said with a lot of the second film did improve its CGI by a lot. But of course, we'll save that. Now, I guess we've talked about the story, the characters, and of course the effects. We've said practical effects on it still look good to this day. Like when there's moments the monsters actually like the costume fighting Hellboy, it looks really good. And the CGI, it's dated, but like Richard said, there's charm to it. Like it's not like what's a good thing? It's not like Stephen King early movie CGI. Oh god, if we honestly listen, people, if we started doing Stephen King criticism videos, let's just say this section just talking about the Hellboy CGI, we could do like 3 separate videos on Stephen King CGI.
Oh God, yes, we could.
don't get me wrong, I love
so
Stephen
true.
King books and I love a lot of his films, but I'm not blind. Some of them are bad with its with its CGI. But now this goes into the final point of this discussion. Does this film deserve the trilogy finale that it was setting up? Obvious answer is yes, but we're also realist. It's not going to happen. Unfortunately, at least not as a live-action film.
No. Well, okay. Look, I've been championing. I know we're like just on a quick tangent here. I championed Hellboy 3. I wanted this trilogy to be completed because Del Toro and Perlman had so many great ideas, and which I want to save for this when we get to the second film and we end that by talking briefly about what the third film is going to do. But I will say this, look, I believe in my heart of hearts that a third film could have happened, but there were certain problems that, just kept it from happening. And we're at an age now where Del Toro and Perlman they've made peace with it. They put it to bed. They tried back in the late 2010s to get a Hellboy movie going. They even came out and said, look, we want everybody to create a hashtag. We want everybody to sign forms. We don't want your money. That is the one thing I respect about these two guys. They could have gone the easy route and just gotten an Indiegogo campaign started, but they both said, no, we are not taking your money. We refuse to take your money. We want you to speak not with your wallet, but with your voices. And they had a great campaign for that. And I even personally thanked Ron Perlman for that when I met him. And he was very chill and he was very nice about it. But this movie, I gotta say, look, even just circling all the way back to this first film, even if this movie didn't get a sequel, it actually ends off in a good way to where it doesn't really, just like Batman Begins and the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, there's small teases of where the story could go if it was allowed to continue, but it doesn't directly sequel bait you by saying this is what's going to happen next. See this movie enough times and maybe we'll do it. No, it serves as its own self-contained story, and that's kind of what Hellboy is. If you read all the graphic novels, there's no overarching story in all of them. No, Mike Mignola, he specifically wanted them to feel like their own self-contained arcs and stories. What happens in them is paid off at the end of them. That's it. If there's a sequel, it's not going to immediately pick up where that left off. And that is kind of true with the upcoming Hellboy 2. It doesn't pick up where this film left off. It continues where we last saw them, but it's not continuing a plot thread.
Kind of like early Marvel and DC cartoons. Like each Justice League episode, aside like, you know, ones with like extra parts, you know, one Justice League episode they're dealing with Brainiac, but then the next one they're dealing with Lex Luthor, and the next one it's a Christmas episode. It's like, there's no overarching story. It's just, hey, look, this is what's happening in this episode, and this is what happened in this episode. So you never feel like, oh, do I need to watch this episode to understand this? Do I need to see this episode to understand this? Blah, blah, blah. In fact, you can even watch Hellboy 2 not watching the first one. It doesn't punish you for that. Whereas I feel like, especially with like cinematic movies, like if you want to understand Peacemaker, you've got to watch the Suicide Squad film, which I always encourage anyway, because those two are awesome. But to understand the Avengers film, you have to see Captain America, Winter Soldier, you have to see Iron Man 1 and 2, you've got to see Thor. It's like, oh my god. And especially it's worse now trying to get into a lot of continuous superhero movies because there's just way too much you have to watch just to understand it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that is why in my personal opinion that Matt Reeves, this is off topic here, but that's why Matt Reeves' The Batman and Joker, they take us back to what the early 2000s were doing. Movies like Batman Begins, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Blade 2,
Trust me, people, we
Hellboy
are going to
2.
one day talk about Matt Reeves' The Batman. Trust me, that is something we want to talk about someday.
Oh, I'm down.
Same here.
Yeah,
we will find
I'm
a time. We will find a time.
Yeah, but anyway, it takes us back to this time where I agree with Billy. I kind of miss these days. I hate how things. I've personally just left Star Wars and Marvel alone and refuse to go back to them because they've oversaturated themselves with the continuing universe. With the continuing universe that requires you to watch a bunch of different things. Essentially, you have to do homework. And there's only so much homework you can do before you just say, fuck it, I'll take the F. Give me the F. Hellboy is this beautiful film that I really, really miss the era it was a part of. Like, I really want to go back to this era. And I grew up around this era. And it was the simplest things of, I could just watch a comic book movie and that's it. If there was a sequel, I would obviously see it later down the road, but it wasn't necessary for me to continuously watch the things that are a part of the grand scope of this now interconnected universe. It's small.
Yeah. I guess to wrap up... Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because when you were bringing up Del Toro and Ron Perlman have made peace of it, that was actually going to be kind of my message about this video. It's like, does this film deserve the end trilogy? Yes. But we just have to accept it. It's not happening. But that doesn't mean the fun you had is over. Like, sometimes things just don't work out. Because there are so many things that I've loved that have gotten cancelled. They've been, like, for instance, the DCEU is getting rebooted. I was a bit sad about that. But on the one hand, I'm still looking forward to what could happen. And just like when the new Hellboy was announced, I was excited for it. But, it wasn't the same. But that doesn't mean I'll never not be excited for another attempt at a Hellboy movie. But sometimes if things just don't work out with a franchise, and you're just thinking, I feel like if you obsess with what could have been, you're just going to ruin it more for you. Just in, like, these two films, which we will talk about the second film at some point, but even if we only just had this one film, though, I had fun. And I could gladly watch it again and again, and not have to worry about, what could have been, and this and that.
Yeah, no. I mean, to quote a buddy of mine, it's a miracle that we live in a world where the studio said yes to not one Hellboy movie, but two of them. Think about that. That is a fucking miracle that we can say we had two Hellboy movies, because this property was still niche to the Hollywood system. And the fact that it got two movies out of it, and later on a reboot, and now another reboot, it shows that Hellboy has become his own dominant force in the Hollywood superhero circuit. So
I would even be
these
down
films are
for an
great.
Invincible type show of Hellboy, because I feel like Hellboy could actually work well as a TV show. Because you mentioned Hellboy doesn't have an overarching story. I was like, honestly, in that case, they probably could just do a really good TV show where each episode he's dealing with a new type of threat.
Exactly. Yes. So I agree with Billy. I have a lot of nostalgic memories watching Hellboy 2, but when I saw Hellboy 1, it made me appreciate Hellboy 2 because now I know where everything came from, and I just love this film. It's probably in my top favorite comic book films of all time. It's not better than Hellboy 2. I will never fucking say that, because Hellboy 2 is the superior sequel, but just like Batman Begins, we need to appreciate the first film, because without it, the second one wouldn't have what it ultimately became.
Yeah, overall, the film is good. In fact, I don't even think it's just good. I think it's a shadow masterpiece. You know, it's a film that really didn't have any right to be as good as it was, but we're happy it is as good as that. And I encourage more people to go ahead and watch it and share it around, because I feel like we should have more of these films these days. Not films that you have to look into so many things to understand it. Just a film you can just go into and have fun. I know some films are making comebacks with that these days. Like, I've heard the new Dungeons and Dragons is meant to be really good. Like, there's no overarching plot. It's just a really fun movie. So, who knows? Maybe we are getting to that point where people are just making fun movies again without the need of starting a cinematic universe.
Yeah.
That should definitely be a topic someday, just discussing the whole cinematic universe. Because I have a love-hate relationship with those sort of franchises.
As do I.
Yeah, but
I'd be down for that.
Yeah, one day. But that's our final thoughts on Hellboy. If you've not seen it yet, do yourself a favour, pick up DVD, or if you live in the UK and US at the moment, it's on Netflix. Give it a watch. It's on there till I believe June.
It's on. Yeah, it's on DVD. It's on Blu-ray. It was recently put out on 4K along with Part 2. You can stream it on HBO Max here if you live in the United States. You just support the fucking movie. Like, if you're still in a Del Toro high from his Pinocchio film, then give the Hellboy movies a watch. Absolutely.
You can even watch it in your jam sandwich. No, you can't do that. Can you imagine that? You just bite into your sandwich, you're just like, oh, cool, Hellboy. I mean, you're probably going to lose your teeth.
Now,
but...
if you'll excuse me. Yeah. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to make a big stack of pancakes, nachos, and I'm going to adopt around 50 cats.
And I'm going to say something funny for the end of this video. Fuck it, let's just do outros. So, with all said and done, Richard, thank you again for doing another discussion, and we definitely want to talk about more comic book movies and stuff like that, especially with a certain Batman and other Hellboy sequel. So,
yes.
Obviously, I'm still job hunting at the moment, so before I can start planning all that, I got to focus on my life. And also Resident Evil 4.
Fair enough.
Good game, by the way. Maybe you could check out some of the videos I've already uploaded about it. But anyway, shameless plug aside, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw here, stick around. We'll have more content like this in the future. Richard, do your outro.
Thank you for having me. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be back on my own channel soon whenever I can get Sam and Sean to come out of retirement, so to speak. I'm kidding. But if you still want to see more of me, I'm always doing fun collaborations with Billy, and I also came back out of Death Battle Reaction retirement. So, yeah, go check that out on my boy's channel, the Methley. the Methley Crews, as they call themselves.
Sounds like a drug.
Right. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time.
Farewell, everybody. Though Hollywood, if you are listening, the whole Putin versus Hellboy idea, call us. We might be interested.
They're never gonna call us.
A boy can dream.